Hi, good afternoon, good morning. Hey, it's Brenda again, Balancing Act with Chris, Peter, the whole crew, and welcome to the second session of our Makers of How to Create an Excellent Sim. Hope you all are doing well. It has just been some week, in America. And so just want to welcome everybody. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. I know that there's at least two new people who are joining, and so you don't have to if you don't want to, but if you want to just say hi, Andrew from Iowa. Hi, Andrew. So thanks for joining us today. And Aaron from Washington, thank you for joining us today. I think I know I've had conversation with at least one of you. So thanks for joining us. Same kind of, you guys know the drill. If you have any questions or comments, but we do want to know if anyone might want to just kind of pipe in right now. Did any of you create a simulation this week? And you're free to tell us if you had that experience and if you have any questions about it, what your experience was like. Hopefully it was good. And hopefully you have some questions that you want to relay to us today about that. But I think you're going to really enjoy today, because while some of you have had the overview now a few times, today we're just going to get into the nuts and bolts of creating a simulation that's engaging, interactive, and I think kind of we'll get into some of the questions that you are going to need to ask residents, council, citizens. So let's just go over the agenda really quick. And as I said, same things apply. You can feel free to ask a question online. You can raise the hand thing and we'll get to you. We're happy to turn over the mic and not hear ourselves, to be honest. But let's get to it, because we know your time's at a premium. So the plan today is we're going to go over scenario questions. And I know conversations, Leslie Marie from the San Juan Public Health. Hi, Leslie. You and I talked at great length last week about creating scenario questions, kind of the best ways to do it. And there's all sorts of different models out there. You can be really, really creative on your approach. And Chris is going to kind of go over all sorts of different ways to approach these questions. I think we went over the 3 C's, the other day. We went over constraints, we went over consequences and context. And one of the things that we allow, and we've really gotten more robust for those of you that have been with us for a little while, is the ability to add really good context, robust context. You can add graphs, pictures, videos, and Chris is going to show you a little bit about how to do that. It's really actually quite simple. So we're going to go over that. And then we have all sorts of settings and adjustments. And sometimes when I hear the word setting, I think, oh my gosh, there's going to be like all sorts of things, and I have to go into that toolbox and it'll be I have to look through lots and lots of layers, and it really isn't like that. And this is spoken from, to be honest, someone like me, who as soon as you look at the toolbox, I get hives. But this is not that. The settings and adjustments are intuitive, and Chris is going to go over how you can really fine-tune your simulation to make it work for you, answer the questions that you need addressed. He's going to go over entry and exit, as I think he kind of showed you a little teaser last week. You can use your entry modal to really frame your conversation. What do you want what do you want them to know? What frame of mind do you want them to enter the simulation with? So we can encourage you to use it a lot. And you can change it and over time, and you can change it every 2 weeks if you want. So Chris is going to go over that. And I think we're going to, there's been a lot of questions about meeting mode. And this is our virtual tool to let you use a Balancing Act in a virtual meeting. And when Chris and I first developed this feature a couple years ago, it was because we were face-to-face facilitators and we wanted to be able to use meeting this tool in a meeting face-to-face because we know how it adds a lot of pizzazz to meetings. People like it. We never dreamt it would be possibly one of the way we're communicating right now. So Chris is going to go over that. And lastly, we have tons of analytics available. So for those of you that want data, who your boards want data, we can provide that. And Chris is going to go over the best ways to take a look at analytics. Do you have any other questions? You can raise your hand, write them. No? Okay. Well, again, welcome to those of you that weren't with us last week, and those of you that you are making the time to come back for round 2. Thanks a lot, and I'm going to hand it over to Chris.
Okay, thank you so much, Brenda. And if it looks like I'm not looking at you, it's because I've got 2 screens. So one screen has the webcam, the other one has the presentation. So I'm going to turn away from you. I apologize for that, but I am obviously paying attention. Okay, so last time we focused on importing and importing your data in, and we talked about the data format for that. But we also want to let you know that you have full control over the simulation, its features, its attributes, its settings, etc., from the control panel. And so I've got a whole presentation that we'll make available to you afterwards that has a slide of each one of these things. But I think it's going to make the most sense if I just sort of go to my Sandbox account and just sort of show you around. So I'm going to quickly, just for review, I'm going to show you, I'm going to give you a quick tour so that you'll know what I'm helping you learn how to create. So as Brenda mentioned, we've got the option to customize the intramodals. This is a relatively new feature, but it's been very popular. You can put in a logo, you can put in a graphic. In this instance, we've got the mayor of Fairbanks, Alaska, simply looking into the camera. I think it's a simple thing. I think it probably was shot on an iPhone, just saying residents. We've got some tough decisions to make, and we've got a competent professional budget staff that are working on these things, but there are some big issues that are visible to the public that we would like to have your input on. And so this lasts, I think, about 2 minutes or so. And then if you click the next one, and by the way, these are optional. If you want people just to jump right to the simulation, you can do that too. We do think it's kind of useful to have this. But the second screen allows you to gather information. So in this case, you can ask a sample survey question such as, are you satisfied with city services? And hopefully people are going to say very. If you want to ask people for the email address so you can stay in touch with them, you can do that. And this all shows up on a CSV on the back end. And then down here, this is something we're really happy about because, as Brenda said, we started out being public engagement professionals, and we've been doing this for about 22, 23 years now. But one of the things that, as we move to online, as being an additional modality, is that people are reluctant to give their address online. And so we wanted, but we continue to get requests from our clients to be able to show the where people live, because it's sometimes you want to know about council districts, or you want to know are we only hearing from people on the south side of town? Well, what about the north? And if you have that information, maybe you can. There's a couple there's some strategies that you can do to get more people from the north side to participate. And so we came up with a very simple way where you can enter your postal code, zip code in the U.S., postal code I think in Canada. And so I'm just going to put in mine here in Denver, and I'm going to say go. And then it pulls up a map that's centered around that zip code, and it just says click on the map to position the pin near where you live. And so you can zoom in a little bit if you want. And so without asking people anything too personal, you can just ask them if they'll drop a pin about where they live. And so when they do that, the pin shows up on a map on analytics along with everybody else's pin. It's actually really kind of a fun thing to see populate. And then for the detailed report, we give you we write the longitude and latitude of where that pin was. So if you want to do some detailed analysis and even cross-reference it with what people said in different places, you can do that. Okay, so let me just illustrate some examples here. So we talked, I think, mostly last time about categories and subcategories. So Once Again, police department in this instance is the category. Police operations is the subcategory, and then the starting amount. In this case, it's $810,000. So we've got a couple different ways of interacting with the tool. And so the easiest one, and the one that shows up by default, is to have this plus minus. And so each time you click it, by default, it takes 1% of this, does the arithmetic for you over here, and then because I've added without decreasing other spending items or increasing taxes or revenue of some kind, it's put me into deficit. And so that's the simplest way, and by default, that's if you import using our CSV, this is what gets created. You can also create it manually if you wish. But then these next two items are we think more useful to the degree that last time we talked about the 3 C's of budget simulation, constraints, consequences, and context. That these help to fill those out a little bit. So this is what we call a scenario question. In this case, it's asking what role of civilians, and this is a cost-saving question. And it's basically saying, should civilians be used to take most police reports instead of sworn officers? And so if you click on this, it says some research suggests that this can be done without harming quality of policing. And then you click on this, and it's got a little bit more explanation, and it just says a recent study talks about this, and click here if you want to read it. And so then it gives you 2 options. So these are the scenario questions, and these can be as elaborate as you wish. You can add context if you want to any of these things. Any place there's a blue info icon, you can add an info icon to almost all of these items that show up here. But if somebody says, okay, I think I might be interested in this, but what do I get for it? Well, you click on this, and you just freed up $90,000. And so you now got a surplus that you can use to offset needs for cuts in other places. I know that most of you are cutting right now, so that could be a useful thing. Or it could be used to mitigate the need for a tax increase, et cetera. Usually there's no problem finding out what to do with the surplus. So that's a scenario question. I'm going to show you how to make those in just a sec. And then over here, you've got detention. And so this looks just like a plus minus question, but we've added a setting to it. And so if you reduce it like this, and you reduce expenditure below $200,000, it comes up with a little warning that just says, if you do that, if you want to cut this, you can only go a certain level. You can't completely zero it out. And once again, that's one of the constraints, is that you have a legal obligation in this instance to provide decent places for people who have been arrested to be held. And so that's just another example of the type of constraint you can add. So let me now show you. I'll go back to my my sample page here, and I'm gonna, just for the sake of illustration, I'm going to create a simulation, and we're gonna say, I'm just gonna call it maskers. I guess I got masks on the mind. Makers Workshop 2, and we're gonna start from scratch. And then I'm going to go here, and it's going to open up a shell, and I'll be going over what's behind each of these tabs. But I want to start by importing a CSV. So I've already got one made, and this is what we talked about last time. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I'm going to mostly go here. I'm just going to pull in some sample revenue, and as you can see, it's very similar to the one I just showed you: taxes, sales, et cetera, fines. And then I'm going to get spending. So I'm going to import that, and we've got this. And now, if I take a look over at my preview, it's got the basics of a simulation. I'm going to show you how to change each of these elements. So right now, it's just got some plain vanilla language here, and then it's got really nothing here, and it's not showing the drop pin feature. And then if we go here, oh, you know what? Sorry, I had already added this in. I'll show you. I'll give you a different example. I had that spreadsheet actually creates a scenario question. I'd forgotten about that. But let me go back over here, and then I'm going to show you how to create each of these things. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete this. Let's see, I'm going to remove the scenario question just so I can show you how to create a new one. So we're going to create that question about civilian staff. And so we can go here, and we can say convert to a scenario question. And on the back end, we're just going to call it, civilian staff. This just shows up on the CSV report. It's just a label for you. And we're going to say, should we use civilians for police reports where feasible? And then down here, we're going to say no. and we don't want to do that. And then we can add a dollar difference, and we're going to say that's the status quo, so that gets a $0 difference. And then this is where this design feature, we've got info and more details. This is what shows up throughout balancing acts. I'm going to go ahead and show you how you would populate that now. So I'm going to say $0 difference, and then I'm going to say some think that this is important to helping the police build relationship in community. And I know that this is a big issue right now for a lot of folks. And then down here, we've got the option to do a variety of things. And we could say, here is a police car. And then I can go over here and I can add a picture. And I go up here to my pictures. And I think I've got one that is a police car. Let's go ahead and take let's go police car here. And so then it's gonna, because we're ADA compliant, we're just gonna say police car. This is a tag that shows up. And if some of you are familiar with or not familiar with these tags, and then this is my new more detailed screen. It's gonna show up with a police car. If I wanted to add a link to it, I could. If I wanted to embed a page, I could, such as a YouTube video. That's how we got the video of the mayor of Fairbanks on there. Let me now go down and create my second option. So I'm going to say, yes, use civilians, and we're going to give that a dollar difference of -90,000. And then we're going to say this. This should be explanatory. Evidence shows this does not harm police community relationships. And then I'm going to pull in a picture here. Let's see, I'll get a picture of a civilian taking a police report, and we're going to just say civilian. We're going to submit. Oops. I get it. Submit, and there she is. And we're going to say done. And then it's going to think for just a moment. And then I'm going to go back up to preview. And when I'm going to just skip out of this, and then when I go to take a look, it's got civilian stuff. And so I deleted the previous one that I'd made. And we've got the question, should we use civilians for police reports where feasible? Right now it's at $90,000. And we've got no as our default answer. And it just says some think this is important. And then we've got a picture of a police car. And then down here is yes. And we click on this and more details. We've got a picture of a civilian taking a police report. And then this has a 0 value on the proposed budget. This has a net savings of $90,000. Obviously, if it were a new program that you were asking about and it's a new expense, this would be a positive number, and you can have multiple answers down here as well. So that's how you do a scenario question. And once you know how to do a scenario question and add that context, that applies to any place where you see context, including up here. It's kind of the same way. You've got that same pattern of the option to add more info, which is just text, and then you've got the option to add more details where you can put in pictures, videos, anything you want. Okay, so let's say that we wanted to go to detention. Let's just say that detention may be the wrong word, and instead of calling it detention, let's just call it jails, short-term holding facilities. And we've got a certain amount here, and we've got a description of it here. But what we want to do is we want to go over here to this ellipses menu, and we want to go to standard plus minus settings. And so this gives us a lot of things that we can do. We can lock it. So in this case, I don't think we need to lock it, but maybe it's a bond payment, or it's some required maintenance that really isn't up for debate. Something like that. You could lock a category or subcategory if you want. In this case, I'm not going to. And then you've got some other options. So there's an item alert. So an item alert is different than what I showed you a minute ago. I'll show you what an item alert is. An item alert is, say we live in Colorado where you have to have a vote of the people to have a tax increase. This is an item alert. So it says increasing sales tax requires a vote of the people. And instead of saying you can't go any further, you can't do this, it just says, you know what, we're warning you that if you're saying you want to balance the budget by increasing taxes, just know that the elected officials don't have the authority to do that. So that's in some instances, that's good information from you. And so you can go ahead and make the change. And so going back over here, item alert is kind of, it's like a soft floor and a soft ceiling, and you can say I want this to go on and off when I decrease it, increase it, or both. And then once I select that, then I could put in a little message. This one is item change rate. And so right now, I think you saw the plus minus question goes up or down by 1%, plus or minus. If I wanted to change that to 2%, I could do that. Or if I wanted to change it to a fixed dollar amount, I could do that. So I'm just gonna leave it at, I'll leave it at 3%. And then this is where, if we want to replicate the example that I showed you, we want to say, you know what, we can't go below $200,000 because that would put us in violation of state law, and it would mean that we would have unsafe conditions. So we're just going to put in a little note here, cutting this below 200,000 would create unsafe conditions. And then, you can do stuff over here. You can make it a different font if you want, or you can, kind of, a numbered list. And then the same controls I showed you before. So if you wanted to pop in a video, like a YouTube video, you just pop it right in there. If you've got visualizations that you use, like OpenGov or OpenBook, you can pop those in as well. And that's the picture. If I want to put in a ceiling, just do the same thing here. And I'm going to say done. And so let's go back to our preview. And we'll go back to that same item. I'm just going to skip out of this. And we're going to say civilian staff. Should we use civilians or police? No, sorry. I'm up here on jails. Okay, so we change it from detention to jail. So that's reflected there. And then we also had it increase at 3%. So if I hit the negative sign, it decreases it by 3%, and it shows that amount there. And then when I get to 200,000, it should stop me. There it is. Cutting this below 200,000 would create unsafe conditions. So you can really convey, a lot of context, consequences, and constraints, which is just what we found to make a good simulation. And it's really pretty easy to do. I know that sometimes these scenario questions can be a little bit challenging because you have to cost out the different items. But you can also do a pretty good job with, just using the settings on the plus minus where appropriate to convey things as well. We've got, actually Roosevelt, California, an award-winning user of Balancing Act. They actually put certain warnings when you got to a certain level in terms of cutting. It would say, okay, if you cut that much, it means that we're not going to be able to clean the park bathrooms any longer. If you're talking about park maintenance, that type of thing. So you can find a lot of ways to use these tools. We worked with cities and counties and districts and school districts for about 5 years now, and every time there's a suggestion that's made that has general interest, we add it into the control panel and make it very configurable for you. Okay, so let's look at some of these other items now. So we've still got that plain vanilla. I'm going to get rid of some of these tabs. Here. Let's get rid of a couple of these. And let's just look at some of these other items. So let's look at that entry-exit modal. So right now, it just had that plain vanilla. But here we can add some different things. So right now it says, are you a resident? And it's a drop-down. And you decide if you want to include it, make it required, and if you want it repeated on exit. Repeat on exit means that you can ask a question like, are you satisfied with city services going in, or do you think the city spends your tax dollars well? You can ask that at the beginning. And if you want to ask it at the end, you can as well, so that people, you can see if people's mind changes after they learn what you're spending money on. My hunch is that in 98% of the cases that they will, because they'll actually understand better and they'll be more supportive of what you're doing. But if you want to create a new question, you just go up here and you say, let's see, how long have you lived in town? And then you can have it be a text or long text, email address, or a drop down. I'm just going to leave it as text because it's the easiest one to put together. And then this is what shows up on the back end. So, and I'm just going to say done. So now I've got my new question, and I'm going to make it, I'll make it required. And then you've got exit questions here. This shows up after you hit the submit button. So if you go down here and hit submit, it's these guys right here. And there is a relationship, as I said, between these two. If you want a question to be repeated, you just go ahead. And if you have a question that is not answered on the entry questions, it will actually automatically go to become an exit question, so that it'll be it'll show up in the exit question as well, so that you're likely to get an answer. Okay, and then here's your custom settings. So if you want to have drop a pin show up, you click on this, and I would encourage everybody to do this, because this is actually a really cool feature. And then here's where you write the text for that entry screen. So you can say this budget simulation, take that out, and you can say the mayor would like your input. And then I'm going to just quickly go to our own website. I should have done this first. This actually gives me an opportunity to kind of show where some of the things are. We've got a learn tab here. We've got press. The press is usually earned media that our clients have gotten, and so forth. But if you go to the customers tab, you can go down here and you can grab one of these things. I'm going to just grab this one. This is from the city of Phoenix. I think I'm going to copy that. And so we're going to just add a YouTube video here. So we click this here and we plop it in and we say save. And now it shows up, and I'm going to click the check mark. And then this next entry screen allows you to customize that text, and it shows up ahead of the drop a pin and the survey questions, the survey questions, right? So now let's take a look. And as you can see, we don't have the plain vanilla anymore. We've got, the mayor would like your input. We've got this nice little video that plays in this player. And then if we click continue, we've got this question, are you a resident? And then how long have you lived in town? That's the one that I added. We'll just say, the sloppily created question, I should say 15 years. I'd probably make this a different type of question if I were doing it. And then enter your postal code, and then you get that drop a pin functionality. So as you can see, we went from having just some basic stuff that shows up by default when you have your CSV, and in just a few minutes, we're able to add these special attributes that make it a more meaningful simulation and give you the opportunity to communicate with folks better. Impacts I'm not going to go over. I'm going to go over this next week. It's a little bit of an advanced function, and I think we showed you a preview of it before. It lets you show impact of budget decisions on a future year, or it allows you to show a secondary impact from a budget decision, such as the impact on emissions, if you're thinking about if climate is important to your community. But let me now go to settings. You get settings down here, and here you can change the language. French, Marshallese Islander, Spanish, Vietnamese, whichever one of those you want. This doesn't translate everything that you put in. It's not a magic translator that translates all your content. It just changes the fixed pieces of the simulation, like the submit button, or where it says budget, it says presupuesto in Spanish, that type of thing. It might be the case that you need to make an adjustment. Usually not the case in local government, but sometimes there's something that might need to be adjusted. You can make an overall budget adjustment here. Let's see. This I wouldn't worry about either. This is, we'll talk about this next week. This is redirection URL. This is if you're connecting it to a survey tool like SSI or YouGov, or if you're using some other a tool where you want to have both detailed survey responses as well as having simulation responses. And there's actually some evidence. We're going to be doing some educational series on this later, that budget surveys are really not that great of a way of understanding budget preferences. That simulations give you much better detail about how people would make trade-offs and with taking into account costs and context and other concerns. If you just ask a survey question, people typically, the research has shown this, that people say, yes, we like almost every service. And when you ask them about taxes, they say, we don't really like taxes that much. So it really doesn't help you very much. Whereas a simulation both educates people, gives them a chance to make some choices and see those impacts, and then to ultimately bring it into balance, which is what you have to do, which is your constraint. Down here, you've got just a series of checkboxes where you can allow commenting. If you want to not allow social media sharing, you just unselect that. It's just real simple, straightforward. Occasionally, you might want to allow the submission of an unbalanced budget. Sometimes if you're doing it very early in the process where you don't have firm revenue numbers, that might make sense to do. If you want to put in totals underneath for revenue and expenses, you just click those buttons. And then I think we mentioned a little bit last time this idea of the display chart for revenue, or just whether or not you want to have the charts show up. And so you can choose this if you want. And so the reason why we did this is with the precipitous decline in revenue for so many local governments, we found that that many of you wanted to use the tool for making cuts, and you're starting with a negative amounts, and negative amounts don't show up very well on bar charts and donut charts. So this allows you to turn those off, and you can just sort of allow people to focus on the options themselves and bringing them into line with whatever dollar amount of cut you need to arrive at, or whatever constraint you have on the revenue side. Let's see, I'm going to leave these on though. Let's see, and then down here, this just allows you to just, helps you to keep your budget straight. It's just like a quick little description just to help you. And then we give you the option of adding 2 different types of additional context. So you can, it's kind of like a little wizard here. So if you fill this out, it will show up underneath the submit button. And if you want to have something sort of in the footer, you just write it right here. And it can be just a sort of a nice little thing to let people kind of fill. You can add links to sources, etc. A lot of people use this information to put a link to the budget process or to talk about when a budget hearing might be, so that people want to participate. So just a couple places where you can add some notes. So let's see, I think that was about everything that I wanted to show you. So if we preview this, I can't remember if I made any changes that I kept since we last looked at this. Let's see here. Oh yeah, I did. I added the totals. So now you got the total there and the total there. Purely your option. So I'm going to pause there just to see if there's any questions. And Brenda, if you're still on, if there's anything that I didn't hit when it comes to making the simulation.
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm looking to see if we have any questions. Didn't look like we had any before. I just want to emphasize that you can use those. There's a lot of different ways to use those scenario questions. You could use yes, no's. You can use an amount. So there's just many different approaches to do that. And I think Chris is getting ready to show you a bit of a different a simulation that's done by a school board member. And while he's getting up analytics. So yeah, so if you have questions about how to set up scenario questions, just give us a call or an email, and we're happy to think through it with you. But be creative.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we're going to move on. I'm moving to a slightly different account. So we did simulations. Now I'm going to move to the analytics tab just to kind of show you what's there. We worked with a school board to come up with a way for them to help reckon with what it means for them to have a 15% budget cut. It's just brutal. This is a Colorado school district, and they're expecting a dramatic decrease in funding from the state, and they're also expecting to have some decline in revenue from mill levies. And so school board wanted to have some input on what this would mean. Pretty remarkable. They launched it's a medium-sized school district. They launched, I think, about 8 days ago, and they had about 1,500 page views. Really remarkable, remarkable 18 minutes on site, which tells you that people care about this and reinforces that idea that if you give people information and you sort of explain what the trade-offs are, that they actually will become engaged in that. And then this is the number of submissions. So we wish that it were not the case, but we understand why it is, that most people who use your simulation don't actually submit. And so what we've done is we've created a way to collect information on those who just make clicks, who click around and sort of try different things out on the simulation, versus those who submit. And we provide both types of information to you because we think they're both valid, and in most cases they reinforce each other. So then we give you information on your users, where they're coming from, age, new versus returning, gender, etc. And then you go down here and it tells you where they're coming from. And then this is where it gets really interesting. So this is, we give you 3 levels of detail. This is the top level of detail. And once again, they're looking only at a cut scenario. And so we get, these are the 4 types, two types of data and 3 types of averages. So the gold bar is the average of those who submitted. So that's the 111, the people that went through all the constraints and then came up with a balanced budget and showed you what they were. And they, because it was a cut budget, you can see that it makes sense that their cut was larger. The teal bar is those who clicked, so they didn't actually complete the budget, they didn't hit submit, but we still give you the information that they provided you. And then we also provide you the median. So the median is the middle point of all submissions. It's a type of average. It's just kind of intended to provide a little bit more information. It helps reduce the effect if you had a few very extreme selections made. So median is just something nice to kind of check on. And then mode is the most popular, and that can be a very useful one as well. It's just to see, even if it's not the average, in terms of averaging all submissions, but it was the most popular one. So that can be useful information for you as well. Now, if you want to get rid of these and just look at certain things, you can. You just click them up here, and then you can take a look at just what you care about looking at. And so you can see that, in some ways, because money is in the schools appropriately, that's what's taking the biggest hit. Reducing days open, reduced staff expense, etc. I'm not going to show you there. I'm just mostly showing you the analytics, not all their choices. And then down here, you can look at where they want to raise some money. And so these 2 options were locked. The projected decrease in state funding and the projected beginning balance. But then you've got here, you've got the increase that some people wanted to increase fees. Many wanted to use reserves, which makes sense because this is what reserves were created for an economic downturn like you have now. And then one-time revenue, this is like selling land, which maybe is not a good idea, but it depends on what people are trying to balance. And so for each of these, you get additional information about opens, which items were open the most often, and then it gives you the ability to drill down a little bit deeper. So I'll just go to the schools category, and we can kind of just take a look at that. And you can see this is where people made their cuts. So the biggest one was reduction in force, so a RIF, for school staff to match enrollment. I mean, in some ways that seems like the opposite, although that's going to mean some tough layoffs for people. But it has a pretty big impact. It actually gets you to $6.9 million. So, and then this tells you which items, which info icons were looked at the most, and the gray one there is the more detail. So when people went a little bit more in depth, it's a good way of sort of understanding, kind of a proxy for what people are interested in. And then the comments. So we collect all the comments and we assign them both to the category and to the subcategory. There are a lot of comments here. And then I'm just going to show you one more thing where you can drill down even more deeply. So let's go to middle school sports. So this, I think, was a scenario question. Yes, it was a scenario question. And so submitted responses, 51% said, let's take a medium-sized reduction on this. And then over here, you've got the comments over here, want versus need. All school sports should be canceled for this school year, and so forth. So that's analytics. And while I transition, Brenda, anything that you want to add to that, or any questions from the folks on the line?
I don't see any questions, but I did want to add, Chris, and I think I'm not sure you mentioned, but all those can be put into a PDF. So if you want to throw it in a PowerPoint for your board, your city manager, city council, if you're making a presentation to the community, you can easily do that. So you can, each of them, you'll see a little to the right, there's a couple bars, and you can put those into a very nice PDF, and you can put those into a PowerPoint and you're making a presentation.
Absolutely. All right, let's go over meeting mode as well. So as we've been saying on this call, we started out being public policy facilitators and created the online budget facilitation tool because budgets are really hard to talk about with other than just the few people who are truly experts in the budget, and even then it can be a little bit challenging. And so we wanted to create a better facilitation tool. And so we also wanted to make this work in face-to-face settings. And so someday, hopefully, we'll all be able to be face-to-face again. This is Kansas City, Missouri. This year they won the GFOA Award for Excellence in Public Engagement on the Budget. And as you can see, everybody around here is doing it on their phone, on their laptop, et cetera. I think they even sprinkled a few public officials around just to answer questions and kind of hear the conversation. And this, the nice thing about this is that with meeting mode, you create a special URL that that everyone at this meeting could log into, and then what happens with their input, it gets added to the general report, but it also we can show you a screen where it you can project a screen where it shows just the input from that particular meeting, which we think is really a cool thing. And we also have a whole video where we talked about using it during social distancing. So you can use it in real time. It doesn't have to be face to face. It's more about real time. You can use it in real time settings, you know, with your 5 or 8 council members, or you can use it with we've got a number of places that are using it right now with like a community budget advisory committee, and it's just meant for that real-time conversation where you can see what people said, have it aggregated very quickly, and then have a discussion about it. So it may or may not be useful to you, but it's something that that many of our clients have found to be useful. Okay, so the way that you set this up, very easy, is, no, that's not it. Sorry, I'm in the wrong one. It's this one. Okay, so meeting mode. So over here, you just say, I want to create a meeting. And then we're going to just call this makers 2. And then down here, we choose the simulation that we want to make it for. And I think it has to be an active simulation. Let me just go ahead and do this. Okay, so then you've got just, you know, a couple things to look at here. You really don't need to fill anything out here. Essentially, that's about all you do. So I'm going to save it. And then I've got my URL here. So if I click on this, it gives me the URL that I'd give out to the public that they would use, and then the facilitator view. So I'm going to pull up one that has a little bit of information on it so that you can take a look at it. This is Greensboro, North Carolina. And so it's labeled facilitator view. And the idea here is that you would project this on the screen, and people would be working at their tables or on their phones or whatever, and providing input, and then you could show them, okay, when it came to public safety, it looked like, you know, 4 of you increased police spending, 8 of you decreased it, and 18 of you didn't do anything with it. When it comes to fire, it's a scenario question. You know, I don't know why they ask people how many firefighters should be on the trucks. I don't know if that's really the right answer to ask the public, or the right question to ask the public, but it shows you what people had said. So it's very, very simple and straightforward to create, as you talked about. Where it gets a little challenging is kind of the facilitation strategy. So how do you walk people through it? And you know, we've done this before, and we're glad to help you. You know, so if you've got a public meeting come up, whether it's online or face to face, let us know, and we're glad to help walk you through it. All right, so that's meeting mode, and then taxpayer receipt we're going to save for next week. So I think that was really about all I wanted to cover with you. So we can just stop there, and Brenda, I'm sure I've left out some useful things, but go ahead and.
Well, Chris knows that I kind of I ask questions that other people may not, which is, okay, Chris, let's say gosh, I got all the way through my CSV, I uploaded it, and remember, now I want to change, and my simulation's looking pretty good, but I got some feedback from my supervisor that he wants me to change one thing. What do I do?
Sure, so it could be a number of things. So this is the simulation that we're making together. All you do is you edit it, you click edit, and then you go in here and say you want this to say sales tax instead of sales. And you do that. Or if you want to edit the description or the more info, you just go in here. So that you wanted to add a picture, you just go here and do it. It's really easy to do. And in a week or two here, we're just in the last stages of testing and writing the documentation. We're going to have the ability for you to export back out into a CSV, which is kind of a neat thing, so that people can sometimes budget finance people are more comfortable working in Excel. So if you can put your information in, you can put in the special attributes, like creating your scenario questions. And if you want to make some wholesale changes, or if you want to put it into Excel so you can make sure that the columns still add up, you can actually export back to your Excel spreadsheet, your CSV, and then make your changes and then re-import, and it'll do an override of anything that you've changed. So we're making it more and more easy to edit, so you can do it manually, and very soon here you'll be able to do it also through a CSV. And another thing that's on our development pipeline, probably in the next month or two here, one limitation is just for data integrity. We don't allow you, once a simulation is activated, and you activate it just by clicking this button on the upper right, it's impossible to make an edit to it, or we don't allow it. The easy way to do it is just to duplicate it and create a new one. We've received some feedback from clients that they'd like to edit the actual one that is live, and that presents a couple of issues for data integrity and so forth. But we think we've found a technical way of doing it. We just let you know that if you do it, people may not be responding to the same set of options and facts. So really easy to edit once you've as you go. A little bit more complicated to edit once you've activated it.
Thanks, Chris, because that is often a question. Just to remind you, if you forgot, if you're working on one and you forgot to ask a question, you can always add it manually. And I think Chris went over that, how to do that, how to, manually add a category. And sometimes that's easier, to do that. Oh, here, Bianca just added a question. How do we add more than one subcategory? Great question, Bianca.
Man, I love that question. That one's easy. So you just go here. So we're in police, and say that you wanted to add 911. Oops. And there you go, your subcategory. And then if you want to put in a starting amount, you just plop it in, and then you're good to go.
Again, and so if you could have done that in the CSV, but lots of times, at least this is my experience, when I do it in the CSV and then I look at it on preview and then a light turns on and I go, oh, look what I forgot, but I don't feel like editing my CSV and uploading it again. So you can just make this quick change kind of on the fly. So that's a great question, Bianca. Thank you. Others, keep them coming. Leslie, you got anything? Aaron or Michael or Robbie, anything we can do to help you with this? We're happy to do it. I'm trying to think what other questions that I usually have when I'm making them. I don't, I don't think so, Chris. Anything else? I'm looking to see if anybody's got a question. Doesn't look like it. I bet everybody's just happy that we might be over a little earlier. So yeah. Well, hey, if you maybe if you could just, Deborah just has questions. Great question. She's having issues uploading the CSV. This is Deborah from Camas, Washington, I think. Is there a reason why? Is there a way to see why? That's Deborah.
I don't know if Dan is available. Dan's our senior software engineer. He might be the best person to do that. Occasionally, the Excel, if you're starting in Excel and then you save it in a CSV, which is what you need to do to upload it, some hidden characters sneak in there. So Dan has some ways of checking on that. I think it's like pasting it into a different type of editor or something. I don't know, Dan, are you on?
I am here. Yeah, there's a few things that can go wrong, and we do have logs that I can refer to. The quickest way to figure it out is probably send me the file you're having trouble with. My email address is dan@abalancingact.com, and I'll try it myself and check the logs and figure out what the problem is. I'll be happy to help you with that.
Yeah, Deborah, thanks for doing that, because that can be, I know that's a little frustrating. The other way is, just so you know, is if you download the template that when you're starting a sim, it'll say download, it has a downloaded template. If you use that template, it's a very clean way using that template, and it saves as a CSV. So for those of you that haven't started yet, that's a clean way, but Dan is the whiz, and I bet it takes him 5 minutes to figure it out. So thanks, Deborah, and hey, keep us posted. If let us know today, if or whenever you get back to it, if you're if it's successful. So yeah, please let us know.
Yeah.
Other questions? Other questions. Yeah, I think some of you come from all different size communities. You know, Leslie Marie, she's from a public health agency right now, which is, as you can imagine, is going crazy. All different issues. So there are there any other questions? If there are, like, you begin to get into it and you're like, oh, why didn't I ask that today? Just don't hesitate to ping us. Actually, we like questions. So I know Peter has, some of you have been working directly with Peter, our director of sales. I know some of you have been working directly with me, and it's Brenda, and some of you with Chris. And we all have the same email. It's our first names, Brenda, Chris, Peter, Dan, at abalancingact.com. Otherwise, I think, yeah, 9 minutes early. Chris, you got anything to add?
I do. So just like last week, I've got sort of an optional thing. Take about 2 or 3 minutes. It's sort of an advanced use of the spreadsheet where you can create a scenario question with a spreadsheet that I'm going to go over for anybody who wants to stay on. It's actually a really cool feature. Dan was the author of that code. But I also didn't put it in the main presentation because I didn't want to confuse people. If you want to see that, let me know. And then next week we'll talk about taxpayer receipt, which is really cool. That's actually, in some ways, it's got a little bit more appeal, or a different type of appeal than the simulation. We'll talk about dedicated funds. We'll talk about impacts. We'll talk about research mode, multiple languages. We actually kind of covered that, but I can show you what it looks like in Vietnamese, for example, or in Spanish. And then very importantly, we'll talk about communicating your simulation. So show you some examples of some social media, of some earned media, of some strategies. And just what we've seen work. Let's see, getting ready for next week. If you haven't created your trial account, please do. It's free. We made a very extended long-term coronavirus offer. It started in March and it goes until the start of July. Give it a try. If you want just a little bit of orientation or help, please don't hesitate to contact one of us. This is what the screen looks like to create a trial. Please, it's very simple. You'll be up and running in a couple seconds. And then here's the extra. So if we don't have any other questions, I'll just quickly go through using the CSV to create a scenario question. Okay, so this should look, so I'm assuming anybody who doesn't want to know about this is left, but let me just quickly go over. So last week we talked about using the CSV to get information in. We talked about the 5 types of data: category, in this case public safety; subcategory, police; subcategory amount, in this case 254 million. And those are the 3 required items. And then you've got more info right here, just a text description, and more details. That's where you can put in the pictures and the videos, etc. All right, so now we've talked about scenario questions. Plus minus work well, especially if you do some, use the advanced settings on plus minus. But scenario questions, I think, we highly recommend them. So scenario questions look a little bit different. So they've got this question. And so what we've done is we've created a quick way for you to create a question. So going back to that spreadsheet, when you download it, you'll see 6 columns. So the first 5 are the ones I just talked about. More info, more details, and then column F is for a question. So if you leave column F blank, it's just going to create a simple plus minus question. But if you add a question in column F, it's going to ask that question. It's going to put it right here, and then it's going to make 2 answer choices, which can be edited. It's going to be a yes and a yes and a no. And so the no is going to be the opposite of what the amount is. So we've got a little help article on this if you want. This is why I didn't do it in the main part of the presentation, but it's a really nice way if you know something's going to be a scenario question, even if it's not a yes/no question, go ahead and write the question here, and then the system will automatically make a scenario question. I'll just show you really quickly. It's actually what I did by mistake at the beginning, but if I go over here and I say create simulation, I'm just going to put in some gibberish there, and we're going to say start from scratch, and then continue. And then, just for the sake, I'm just going to pull in that revenue file, the one that we've been looking at. This is not the part I wanted to show you, but then on the spending side, this is. So the spending side, I'm going to pull in the CSV that I just showed you on the PowerPoint slide a second ago. And we're going to pull that in. And as we can see down here, it's got, you know, police, operations, detention, and civilian staff. And over here, it's already been made into a scenario question. So it asks if you want to edit it. So then if you go up here to preview it, and once again, we've got our screen that doesn't have, you know, any of our text that we've added or pictures to the entry modals. But if we open up police, we see that we've got the civilian staff, $90,000. And so it just says, should civilian staff be used to take police reports when appropriate? Yes is by default, but if we say no, we've just saved our 90,000 bucks. So anyway, it's a really neat feature. Not absolutely necessary, but especially for use internally, where a lot of the time you're saying, should we do this, should we not do this? It can really save you a lot of time, and it make it really easy to make simulations for departments, for example, where you're looking at various programs. You might have your base that is using plus minus, but then you've got, you know, some adds or some cuts that are potentials. This can make it really easy to do that. So that's it for me.
Great. Again, if those of you that haven't taken a stab to create one, go ahead. It won't take you that long, and I know some of you already have created some substantial ones because we've been taking either I've taken a little peek at them or we've talked about it. So go ahead and take a step. If you have any questions on anything, just drop us a call or an email, and we'll just get back to you very, very quickly. Thanks a lot. Have a good day. Stay well, stay healthy, and we appreciate you sharing in 50 minutes with us, or in almost an hour. Thanks a lot. We'll look forward to it next week, right, Chris?
All right. Yeah, thanks. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.